Emma Wilson woke before the sun, the house quiet and cool, the kind of quiet that should have felt peaceful but instead pressed against her chest like a weight. She lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand why her heart felt restless lately. She had always been someone who believed in calm mornings, hot coffee, and a steady life, but the last few weeks had made her feel like she was walking on shifting ground. Her husband, Daniel, used to be the one who brought light into the house, always smiling, always warm. But lately he moved like a man carrying secrets he didn't want her to see, and every time she asked if he was okay, he brushed her off with a half-smile that felt too thin. She got out of bed and wrapped her robe around herself, walking into the kitchen where the soft humming of the refrigerator was the only sound. She started making breakfast for her stepson, Caleb, who was still asleep in his room across the hall. She loved the little boy deeply. Even though she had known him for only 4 years, he had walked into her life with shy eyes and nervous energy after she married Daniel, and slowly, he had learned to trust her, to run into her arms after school, to tell her about his day, to hug her good night. In many ways, he was her anchor, the one thing that made the house feel like home even when her marriage felt uncertain. As she cracked eggs into a pan, she wondered again about Daniel's recent behavior. She told herself not to overthink it, but late nights at the office, quick glances at his phone, and excuses that felt too well rehearsed kept replaying in her mind. She tried to trust him, she wanted to trust him, but something felt wrong, something felt different, like he was drifting away one small step at a time. The smell of breakfast filled the house, breaking the stillness, and soon she heard the soft patter of little feet. Caleb walked into the kitchen with messy hair and sleepy eyes, rubbing his cheek as he asked what they were doing today. Emma forced a smile, wanting to keep the morning light for him, telling him they could play after breakfast, maybe build a racetrack with his toy cars or bake cookies if he wanted. Caleb nodded excitedly, his mood always lifting hers. As they sat at the table eating, she watched him swing his feet under the chair, humming to himself between bites. She loved how simple life felt with him, how honest he was, how easy it was to be around him. But as soon as breakfast ended, the quiet ache returned. The house felt big and empty without Daniel's presence. And even though they had been arguing more lately, she missed him, missed the version of him who used to reach for her hand in the kitchen, who used to make jokes just to see her laugh, who used to tell her everything. Caleb tugged her sleeve, pulling her back into the moment, asking if they could start playing. She nodded and followed him into the living room. Sitting on the carpet as he laid out his toy cars in colorful rows, he talked fast, excited, showing her which car was the fastest and which one could drift around corners. She laughed, letting herself get swept up in his energy, grateful for the distraction he gave her. The morning sunlight streamed across the room, warming the floor as they played, and slowly, her tension eased. But then in the middle of the game, Caleb said something that made her hands still on the carpet. He mentioned a woman's name, Melissa, someone she had never heard before. He said it casually, the way children do when they are just repeating what they heard, telling her that Daddy's friend Melissa had visited his office again, and that Daddy smiled a lot when she came. A quiet pulse of fear moved through her chest, sharp and cold. She tried to stay calm, asking who Melissa was, but Caleb shrugged, saying he didn't know. He only remembered because Daddy had been in a good mood after she left. Emma nodded slowly, trying not to show the panic building under her ribs. Her mind raced, connecting dots she didn't want to connect. The late nights, the sudden phone calls, the careful way Daniel guarded his device. It all felt heavier now, more real, more dangerous. But she didn't want to scare Caleb, so she forced her voice into something light, telling him to pick the next car. Trying to push the rising dread away, she watched him play, watched his small, joyful movements, and wondered how much longer she could pretend everything was fine for his sake. After a while, she excused herself and went into the hallway, leaning quietly against the wall. She took a slow breath, her thoughts loud and messy. She didn't want to assume the worst. She didn't want to be the kind of person who jumped to conclusions, but her heart felt like it was folding in on itself. She walked back into the living room with a smile she didn't feel, sitting next to Caleb again and pretending nothing had changed. But everything had changed, at least inside her. Every movement Daniel had made in the past month now flashed in her mind differently. Every late night, every quiet moment when he avoided her eyes, every time he said he was tired or busy, Caleb didn't notice the shift in her mood. He just kept playing with excitement, telling her about a new game he wanted to invent, racing cars across the carpet, laughing when one crashed into the bookshelf. She tried to laugh too, but her mind kept circling the same fear again and again. Later in the morning, While Caleb played with his building blocks, Emma walked into the kitchen and checked the clock, wondering when Daniel would be home, wondering if she should confront him, wondering if she should wait, wondering what truth she was truly ready to uncover. She sat down at the table and put her face in her hands, trying to steady her breathing. The house felt too quiet again, even with Caleb humming in the other room. It felt like she was holding something fragile and dangerous in her chest, something that could break with the wrong word. The thought of losing her marriage terrified her, but the thought of living with a lie felt even worse. She wanted to protect Caleb, to keep the home warm and safe for him, but she also wanted to protect herself, her dignity, her heart. She looked toward the living room where Caleb was building a tall tower, smiling proudly every time he added another block, and she felt a wave of love wash over her. It was that love, the love she had for this child, that gave her the strength to stand up again, to walk back into the room, to sit with him and continue their morning. Even though her heart continued to ache beneath her calm expression, the day moved quickly after that, filled with games, snacks, small conversations, and moments where she almost forgot the fear waiting in her mind. She worked hard to keep the day normal for Caleb, giving him her patience and attention even when her thoughts kept drifting toward Daniel, toward Melissa, toward the truth she didn't want but could no longer ignore. As afternoon sunlight shifted across the room, she watched Caleb draw pictures on the floor, humming softly, and she felt a strange mix of peace and pain settle inside her. Peace because the moment was gentle, pain because she knew the future might not be. But she pushed the thoughts aside, remembering her goal, to stay strong, to stay steady, to face the truth when it came, not before. She wasn't ready yet, not today. By the time evening approached, Emma had made dinner, cleaned up toys, and tucked Caleb into the couch with a movie. Her heart still carried the same heavy questions from the morning, but she had learned one thing clearly. She could no longer pretend everything was fine. The truth was waiting for her, whether she was ready or not, and though she did not know what she would discover next, she felt the ground shifting beneath her feet, moving her toward a moment she could no longer avoid, a moment that would change everything. And that quiet, trembling realization became the true beginning of her heartbreak, her courage, and the unraveling of the life she thought she understood. Emma spent the afternoon trying to steady herself, trying to keep her hands from shaking every time she remembered Caleb's innocent words. She moved around the house with a careful calm, picking up toys, folding blankets, and checking on Caleb as he played on the living room floor. But inside, her thoughts jumped in every direction, hitting the same wall again and again. Who was Melissa? And why had Daniel talked about her enough for an 8-year-old to remember her name? She kept telling herself to breathe, to wait for answers, to stay strong until she had real proof. But fear has a way of creeping into every quiet moment, filling the air around her like a storm waiting to break. When Caleb asked if he could play a game on Daniel's tablet, Emma felt a small twist in her chest. She wasn't sure why at first. Maybe because Daniel guarded that device more than anything else. Maybe because he always kept it close, always typed quickly when messages came in. But Caleb looked so hopeful, bouncing lightly on his toes, that Emma didn't want to disappoint him. She reached for the tablet sitting on the entry table, hesitating only a second before handing it over. Caleb unlocked it with the easy confidence of a child who had used it many times before, tapping through the home screen until he found his favorite game. Emma watched from the couch, trying to act like she wasn't paying attention, but her eyes kept drifting toward the screen. Every time Caleb clicked something, her heart jumped a little, and then it happened. A single tap too fast, a swipe too quick, and suddenly a hidden messaging app opened, one she had never seen before. Emma didn't move at first, frozen as the screen filled with a list of names. Some were co-workers she recognized, but one name stood out in a bold, bright line. Melissa H. At that exact moment, a message chimed at the top of the screen, as if the universe had decided she had waited long enough. "I miss yesterday already, wish you were here." The words hit her like a cold wave, her breath caught, and for a moment she wasn't sure if she was actually breathing. Her vision blurred at the edges, but she forced herself to focus. Her hands trembled as she gently took the tablet from Caleb, trying not to look as shaken as she felt. Caleb blinked up at her, confused by the sudden change in her face. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked softly, his voice small and uncertain. Emma swallowed hard, shaking her head quickly, trying to smile even though her throat felt tight. "No, sweetie, you didn't do anything wrong," she whispered. "I just need a minute." She carried the tablet into the hallway, leaning against the wall to steady herself. The screen was still lit, still showing the message, still proving what she had tried not to believe. She scrolled up with shaking fingers, reading the messages one by one. Each one was warmer than the last, full of inside jokes, shared moments, and comments that felt too familiar too. Close messages sent at late hours, short check-ins during the day, small pieces of someone else's relationship, a relationship she hadn't known existed. Her stomach twisted painfully. She didn't want to look anymore. But she couldn't stop herself. She needed to know how long this had been going on. She needed to understand how her marriage had slipped into a place she didn't recognize. She scrolled further, reading words that made her chest ache, her eyes filled with tears spilling down her cheeks before she even realized she was crying. The sound of Caleb humming in the living room drifted through the hallway, and she wiped her tears quickly, forcing herself to breathe. She couldn't fall apart now, not in front of him, not when he depended on her to keep his world steady. She closed the app, turned off the tablet, and walked back into the room with a soft smile she had to build from nothing. Caleb looked up, relief spreading across his face when he saw her calm expression. "Can we play now?" he asked, lifting a toy car in his hand. Emma nodded, sitting beside him on the carpet, even though her heart felt like it had been cracked open. The rest of the afternoon moved in a strange blur. She played with Caleb, answered his questions, laughed at his jokes, and helped him build a tower out of plastic blocks. But everything felt distant, like she was watching her life from behind a window. Her smile felt heavy, her chest felt tight, and every noise in the house made her jump slightly, expecting Daniel to walk in, expecting her heart to break all over again. When evening arrived, Emma reheated leftover pasta for dinner, stirring the pot without really tasting or smelling anything. Caleb talked happily about his school friends and the new project his teacher assigned, and she nodded at all the right times, never letting her voice shake. But as soon as Caleb finished eating, she slipped into the bedroom, closing the door quietly behind her. She sat on the edge of the bed with the tablet in her hands, the silence of the room pressing in around her. She didn't want to open the messages again, but she needed to know the full truth. Every detail, every clue, every piece of the puzzle that explained why her marriage had started to fall apart. She went through the messages a second time, faster now, her emotions sharper, clearer. The dates went back months, showing steady communication, long days of texting, late-night conversations, work lunches that Daniel had never mentioned, little comments about how he needed the break or how seeing her made the day easier. By the time she reached the first message in the thread, Emma felt numb, her chest hurt, her eyes burned, and her hands felt cold. She knew what she had found. She knew what it meant. She couldn't deny it anymore, couldn't pretend the signs were harmless. But she also knew she needed to think clearly. She couldn't confront Daniel in anger, not when Caleb's stability depended on the decision she made next. She needed time. She needed strength, she needed a plan, and she needed to hear the truth from Daniel himself, no matter how much it hurt. When she heard the front door open, her whole body tensed. She placed the tablet face down on the bed, wiping her cheeks quickly, forcing herself to breathe normally. She walked out of the room calmly, finding Daniel in the hallway, setting down his keys. His smile was warm, gentle, the kind of smile she had once trusted without question. But tonight, she saw it differently. She saw the distance behind it, the carefulness, the small hesitation. He greeted her softly, leaning in for a kiss, but she stepped back slightly, hiding the movement by pretending to straighten a picture frame on the wall. Daniel didn't seem to notice the shift, or maybe he noticed but didn't want to ask why. They exchanged small words that felt forced, empty, almost scripted. Emma watched him closely. The way he rubbed his neck, the way he avoided eye contact during certain moments, the way he seemed tired in a way that didn't come from work alone. She didn't confront him that night. She let him talk about his day, let him check his email, let him sit on the couch scrolling on his phone, probably texting the same woman whose words had broken her hours earlier. Emma tucked Caleb into bed, reading him a story, smoothing his hair, whispering good night, and when she kissed his forehead, she felt something inside her shift. A quiet strength rising through the pain, a reminder that she wasn't just fighting for herself but for this child who trusted her completely. When she went to bed that night, Daniel was already asleep, or at least pretending to be, turned away from her, breathing slow and steady. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the truth pushing down on her chest. She didn't have answers yet. She didn't know what the future would look like. She didn't know how the conversation would go, or how much more pain she would have to face, but she knew one thing with absolute clarity. She could no longer ignore what she had seen. She could no longer pretend the messages were something innocent. She could no longer lie to herself to protect her own heart. Part 2 ended not with closure, but with a new kind of strength settling inside her, a strength born from heartbreak, fear, and love all at once, and that strength would guide her to the next moment, the moment when she would finally choose truth over comfort, honesty over silence, and herself over a lie she never deserved. Emma woke early the next morning, her body heavy from a night of restless turning. She hadn't slept much, every hour haunted by the messages she had read on Daniel's tablet. Every time she closed her eyes, those words flashed behind her eyelids, reminding her of the truth she never wanted to face. She lay still for a moment, listening to the light rustle of wind outside, the faint hum of cars passing down the street, and the soft breathing of Caleb in the next room. Those gentle sounds grounded her, reminded her that, even in heartbreak, life around her kept moving forward. She sat up slowly, rubbing her tired eyes as sunlight slid through the blinds, painting pale lines across the bedroom floor. Her chest felt tight, but her thoughts were clearer than the day before. She knew she couldn't hide from this any longer. She needed space, air, a moment to breathe without walls closing in on her. She needed to decide who she wanted to be when everything finally came out into the open. After getting dressed, she walked into the hallway where Caleb's door was slightly open. She peeked inside and found him sitting cross-legged on the floor, arranging small action figures into a pretend battle scene. His innocence was like a soft hand on her shoulder, anchoring her to the world she cared about most. She walked in with a smile, trying to keep her voice calm as she asked if he wanted to go to the park. Caleb's face lit up immediately, and he jumped up to grab his sneakers. They walked to the park down the street, the cool morning air brushing against their cheeks. Caleb ran ahead, kicking at leaves and laughing when they flew into the air. Emma followed slowly, her thoughts moving faster than her steps. She watched him climb the slide, shout toward the sky, and pretend he was flying. She envied him. His ability to stay present, his freedom from the worries that tangled her heart. She sat on a bench near the playground, watching parents push strollers, throw balls with their kids, and sip morning coffee. Everything around her looked so normal, so steady, but inside she felt like she was living in a different world. One filled with bruised trust and unanswered questions. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She took it out, already expecting what she saw. A text from Daniel, short and casual. Working late today, don't wait up. She stared at the message, her jaw tightening, her stomach twisted because she knew exactly what working late meant now. She closed her phone slowly, pressing it against her chest for a second before putting it away. Her eyes stung, but she blinked the tears back. She wasn't going to fall apart here, not where Caleb could see, not where strangers might notice. She inhaled deeply, feeling the cold air steady her trembling thoughts. When Caleb ran back to her, he held a stick in his hand and pointed proudly to the picture he drew in the sand. A simple heart with two shaky figures inside, one tall, one small. "This is us," he said with a grin. Leaning against her side in that moment, something inside her shifted. Something warm pushed through the weight in her chest. She hugged him, holding him close for a few seconds longer than usual, whispering that she loved his drawing, and she meant it, because the small heart he carved from nothing reminded her that love still existed for her. Even in the middle of heartbreak, love that wasn't complicated or confusing, love that wasn't fading behind late-night messages. She had to protect. She had to protect him. When they got home, the house felt cold again, not from the temperature but from the silence waiting inside the walls. Emma moved through the room slowly, picking up small messes, folding blankets, washing dishes, giving her hands something to do while her thoughts circled around the same truth. She kept imagining how the conversation with Daniel would go, imagining his face, his excuses, maybe even his apologies, but she knew she couldn't predict what he would say. She only knew she needed honesty, whatever form it came in. As the evening settled in, she made dinner for Caleb and helped him with a small art project he wanted to finish for school. But all the while, her mind kept drifting to the moment she had been avoiding, the moment she would finally ask Daniel to sit down and tell her the truth. When he walked through the door later that night, she knew immediately that he sensed something different. He looked tired, but not physically tired, the kind of tired that comes when someone is carrying too many secrets. He set down his keys. Slowly, almost nervously, he gave her a small smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Emma didn't smile back. She couldn't, not tonight. She waited until Caleb was in his room reading a book before she stepped into the hallway and faced Daniel fully. Her voice was calm when she spoke, but her hands were trembling slightly. "We need to talk," she said, the words soft but full of weight. Daniel froze, his face tightening. His shoulders sank as if he already knew what was coming. He just didn't know. How much she had discovered. He nodded slowly, following her into the living room where they sat across from each other, a long heavy silence stretching between them. Emma looked at him the way someone looks at a stranger wearing a familiar face. Her voice trembled only once as she whispered, "I know about Melissa." Daniel's reaction was immediate. His eyes dropped, his breath caught, and he leaned back like her words had pushed him. The guilt on his face was undeniable, raw, and strangely human. For a moment Emma felt the world spin around her, not from shock but from the painful confirmation she had been expecting. He didn't deny it. He didn't try to lie. He nodded slowly, eyes shining with something like regret. He said her name quietly, explaining how it started at work, how he felt overwhelmed, how he hadn't meant for anything to happen. His voice cracked more than once and his hands shook slightly. Emma listened without interrupting. Every word he spoke hurt, but she needed to hear them. She needed the truth spelled out, not left in shadows or assumptions. She needed to understand where her marriage stood, even if it broke her heart. When he finished speaking, the room felt colder, quieter, heavier. Emma didn't yell, she didn't cry, she didn't shake her fist or demand answers he couldn't give. Instead, she sat in stillness, feeling the ache inside her pulse like a bruise. "I tried so hard to trust you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "And I would have done anything for us." Daniel looked away, unable to meet her eyes. His silence said more than any words could. The conversation continued for a long time. Slow, painful, honest, filled with pauses where both of them tried to breathe through the hurt. Emma asked the questions she had been carrying. Daniel explained the things he had been hiding, and by the end, both of them felt exhausted, drained, exposed, but nothing was decided that night. They didn't talk about divorce, they didn't talk about staying together, they didn't map out a future or draw any clear lines. What they did was sit together in a quiet space where truth had finally replaced lies, where pain had replaced confusion, where honesty had replaced suspicion. It wasn't healing yet, but it was the beginning of something real, even if that something was uncertainty. Later, when Emma lay alone in bed, staring up at the ceiling, she slipped her hand into her pocket and felt the folded drawing Caleb had made at the park. The little heart between the two figures felt like a small lifeline, a reminder that even though everything in her marriage felt broken, she wasn't alone in the world. She had love, she had purpose, she had someone who needed her, someone who trusted her, someone who saw her as his favorite person. That small truth helped her breathe for the first time in days, helped her feel the beginning of strength rising through her chest. And as she closed her eyes, she realized that even though her future was uncertain, it wasn't hopeless. Love, real love, still existed in her life, steady and bright. And in that quiet, trembling moment, she knew she would find her way forward, whatever path she chose next.